bring together everyone with a shared love of nature and everyone who loves taking action for wildlife in whatever way they can, into a shared space where we can all learn from each other, we can be inspired from each other. And so these are really lovely informal events, where you can think of it as a kind of virtual campfire where we can just have a discussion and learn from our lovely speakers that we've got this evening. So today we've got two very special speakers who we're really excited to hear from. First of who will be starting with us is Jasmine Qureshi. Jasmine is a speaker, an intersectional activist, a writer, journalist. She does lots of amazing things, and she's going to be sharing her passion for wildlife, for bugs, insects. She'll be speaking a little bit about her identity as a trans and queer person of colour in nature spaces and the work that she does to make those spaces inclusive and safe for people in the trans community and people from diverse backgrounds. So really exciting to have you with us, Jasmine. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we'll be followed with Stephanie Chadwick. Stephanie has been doing some really amazing work, wildlife gardening at home, and she's built a beautiful pond that has attracted all kinds of incredible wildlife. She'll be telling us about how she did that and how she built that pond and how you could try a little pond at home as well. So as we have the speakers sharing their knowledge and their learnings with us, if you have any questions for them, please do pop them in the chat. And as we go along, we'll be collecting all of those questions. Then towards the end of the evening, for the last 30 minutes, we'll have an open Q&A discussion where we'll just have a nice open chat. We'll ask questions, learn from each other, share any tips and advice, and that's open to everyone, so please do feel like you can get involved as well. But we will open up the floor later on this evening. We'll also have Sophie from Avon Wildlife Trust team telling us a little bit about our wildlife gardening competition that is launching. Oh, that has already launched, I believe, and is on now. But Sophie will tell us a little bit about that later. So, without further ado, I will hand over to Jasmine because I know you've got to head off at 6:30. So, any questions for Jasmine, please pop them in the chat as she does her talk, and then if anything doesn't get answered, we can always pass them on. But yeah, Jasmine, all to you. Thank you so much.
So, thank you so much for inviting me. I was very last minute request, but I am still on a speak because I love talking about wildlife, and so basically just take any opportunity. Just gonna get my presentation up. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, nice one.
Well done.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so yeah, I'm Jasmine Isa Qureshi, and I'm basically just going to be going through a few things that I do, and also linking that into wildlife gardening, and why for me that was basically one of the things at the start of my journey that really got me interested in wildlife, and why it's such a amazing, cool thing to get involved in. So yeah, this eclectic mix of photographs is what I do. I, like has been explained very briefly, I'm a journalist for natural history, all the way to sexuality and identity, and also intersectionality. And what that means is I basically link up all of the different parts of my identity into my love and passion for nature, because that's really at the core of all of my jobs, is this desire to tell stories about the natural world and about conservation. And along the way, that's led me to work for BBC Natural History Unit as a researcher. I've also worked for Sound Off Films, which is an independent production company. I've worked for Netflix, presented for CBeebies, and then done a myriad of other things. So I am also a mentor for creative writing workshops, which focus on natural history and getting people involved with natural history and conservation for writing our legacy. And I've done shoots for Attitude Magazine. And this great variety of things that I've done kind of speaks to how, when you're interested in wildlife and nature, there are lots of different things you can do with that interest and with that love for it. But for me, it has been something that I've had to do out of necessity in some cases. So my identity is something that has forced me into a lot of these jobs in a lot of these different places. As someone who is from a strict Islamic Muslim background, I'm also Pakistani and Indian. And I'm a trans woman and non-binary, and all of these different identities means that I've faced a lot of different obstacles when I get into natural history and conservation, because I literally, from when I was very, very young, and I grew up in the middle of London, so I didn't have any parks nearby, really, any reserves within reach. I didn't have a garden or anything. So my interests started small. They started with insects. They started with tiny, tiny plants. They started with really, really intimate personal relationships with moths, with woodlice, with spiders. I know it's not an insect. With before someone comes at me on Twitter, I've basically started quite literally at the very bottom, and it is going through these different phases of loving different kinds of wildlife, of watching documentaries at home and seeing what kind of wildlife there is beyond in the other areas of the planet, that really made me want to go into all of these different areas. And I found that I actually couldn't do that because people weren't letting the type of person who I was into those spaces, or they weren't being comfortable. They weren't making these spaces a comfort for me. So that led me on kind of the other parts of my journey. But really, it started off small with insects, bugs, and entomology. And for me, that has stayed with me. So as an ambassador for the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, I do a lot of work raising awareness to bumblebees, to pollinators, to the wider ecosystems that connect to pollinators. And that means that I really get a chance to see a lot of people's wildlife gardens. And one of the first things that I got involved with actually was keeping verges in urban areas full of wildflowers. And one of the things that I raise awareness of a lot, and people really get tired of me talking about it, is to let wildflowers grow in your garden, because that is one of the best things you can do for pollinators. But that's grown into what I now do. And that is mainly to do with raising awareness, speaking, and trying to make the green spaces, especially in the UK where I grew up, more diverse and decolonizing them. And that will lead on to my next slide, but I just want to reference this quote, which is my own quote, which is something that I said when I was talking about a film that was made, which is called My Garden of a Thousand Bees. And it is a beautiful, beautiful film. It's about this person who is the filmmaker, and he's in his back garden in Bristol, and he decides over lockdown to just film the bees in his back garden. He can't go anywhere, he can't travel anywhere, so he just uses the equipment he has, which albeit is very good equipment because he is a well-known filmmaker, but he just uses his back garden. And he finds so many beautiful bees, different kinds of bees that you would never ever think of being in your garden. Tiny, tiny little bees, and then huge ones right next to them, and they're all living alongside each other. And then he films the other insects and the other animals in that ecosystem, and you see how your back garden is one of the most diverse and incredible ecosystems that you can find. And I think that film is a key film to watch if you want to get involved with wildlife gardening, because it shows you the great beauty that you can attract to your garden if you just go and look, and you just go and look closer, and you leave it be as well. I think a big part of wildlife gardening is letting it flourish. But in order for everyone to be able to do that, you need to decolonize these green spaces. And what does that really mean? So with decolonizing green spaces, what we're talking about is getting rid of the systemic issues which have stopped a lot of people from being involved with nature and conservation before. People like me. So people like me who grew up in a very closed off environment from nature. I had documentaries, I had that help, and that is a privilege of mine. But a lot of people don't get exposed to this. And that means we have a huge quantity of the population that live in urban areas, most of our population, who don't have that connection with nature, who don't get interested in nature from an early age, and they aren't educated on it. So how then are they going to help us to save and conserve the natural environment and the ecosystem of the UK, which is quite starved, unfortunately, from years and years of processed farming? Again, a problem with policy, which links into this cause that I'm trying to do, which is to decolonize the natural world. And that is what this, my organization, Queer Rootz, is about. So Queer Rootz, I've only just started it, so it is literally just me at the moment. It's just a page and grants that have gone out to various people to get it off the ground. But it is all about tearing apart the perspectives that we've had of nature before, which have been rooted in misogyny, in patriarchy, in this real scientific, and by scientific, I don't mean real science, I mean very systematic, very, very closed off, very gate-kept world of nature, because really nature is for everyone, and it is something that everyone should be able to learn about and feel comfortable in and really get hands-on with. And I find that a lot of people have been stopped from doing that because these natural environments have been open to people who have a lot of knowledge of conservation, who are scientists, who are usually cisgender men, who are usually white, who are usually middle class. And that shouldn't be the case, because we need everyone to get involved if we are going to save the natural world. So that's what this organization is about. It explores this concept that the natural world is very flexible, that it doesn't really listen to the behaviors that we characterize as our own. When we display them in ourselves and we project them onto the natural world, we limit how much we learn about it. And part of nature gardening and part of wildlife gardening, you will find when you listen to a lot of other talks, is that you have to be flexible with how you view the natural world. So I think that's probably about it for me. I have put this little picture of some books because I need to remind myself to plug the book that I am writing at the moment, which is about all of this. It's about being flexible in your view of wildlife. It's about understanding that wildlife is flexible, and it's a spectrum-based concept about how ecosystems are flexible and they link all over the world, about intersectionality and about why my identity puts me in that place where I can link up all of these different communities. And it's just about having fun and enjoying and really getting to grips with wildlife, and especially insects. I know I've only touched on it briefly, but I love insects. I love entomology, and that love of these tiny, tiny creatures, which are the crux of our ecosystem, especially bumblebees, which prop up our infrastructures and our entire world. That love has stayed with me since I was really, really young. So these are a few links to some of the places you can go if you want to find out more about what I do. I guess scientifically, I'm a marine biologist, so I do talk a lot about ocean ecosystems and marine ecosystems, but you will also see a lot of stuff on there about the articles that I write, which are about all of these different issues and about interlinking humans with nature. And also maybe a bit of wildlife photography and wildlife filmmaking, because that is something that I do as well. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me as well. That was really cool. And I love community-based projects, and I love projects where people get to chat about things. So I think that's really, really awesome and really useful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jasmine. So good to hear about all the different strands of work that you do and all the amazing skills that you have. Thank you for sharing that with us. Someone did mention in the chat, let me just get the name, sorry. It was Tony was asking, so for the Garden of a Thousand Bees film, is it? I had a quick look online and it looks like sadly it's not available to watch online at the moment. But do you know where we might be able to watch it, or if we could host a screening and potentially have you there?
You could, but I would have to, I think probably through Wildscreen, but I could try and email someone and see if we can get that involved, because that would be really cool. And I really want more people to watch it.
Amazing.
So yeah, I will try to get that done,
Awesome
because actually
screenings.
I know it's a bit inaccessible in terms of like watching it.
That would be great. Yeah, if it would be great to have a screening. Maybe we could share that online as well, and then yeah, you could speak a little bit about the different species in the film. That would be amazing. Um, I think we've got a couple of minutes, and I know you have to head off soon. Um, so if you're happy to answer a couple more questions, Jane asks, "What's the most inspiring thing that you've been involved with over the last 6 months or any time period?"
Oh, that's a hard one. I think probably so there's this program called the Explorers Program at the Natural History Museum. And it is incredible. It's amazing and it's put on by people of color. And for me, I actually had gotten really used to going on panels and being the only person who was like a woman of color, a trans person of color, or any sort of minority, and kind of speaking about that as like the one thing. But when I went there, I was amongst loads of other people who looked like me, and it was inspiring to see all the different scientists there at the Natural History Museum in London, which is where it was. And the whole program was about poetry, it was about storytelling. And so I got to talk about some of my things, and I also got to read my poetry, which was really, really cool. And that was only the second time that I'd been able to kind of do that on stage. And so now I get to put it on my CV, I guess. I'm a poet, so that was really cool as well. So I think that was probably the most inspiring thing over the last 6 months. Any time period, yeah, probably that still, just because it is something I've never seen happen before. Um, and out of all the fun, even if they've been incredible projects, it just showed me how much diversity there actually is in terms of people who are interested in science, filmmaking, and story. But it also showed me that you don't have to be a scientist to like science, to communicate about it, to communicate about nature. You can be a writer, you can be, you can be a filmmaker, but you don't have to make films about natural history. You can basically turn anything that you love at the moment into a love of nature, because nature is intertwined with who we are. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so important to have that representation, and I think as well for young people to see people that look like them in those spaces, so they believe that they can also follow into the same roles and have and have those role models to kind of yeah to learn from and to feel welcome in those spaces. So yeah, that's really important. Thank you so much. That's amazing, Jasmine. Really lovely to have you. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you do. Um, we do have to move. We will move on to Stephanie, but there are a few questions in the chat for you, Jasmine. So if you're happy to stick around for a couple more minutes, then please do and answer any questions in the chat. If there are any more that follow on, I will pass them on to you. But yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine. Um,
Thank
really lovely to
you.
hear from you. Next up,
Yeah.
uh, we've got Stephanie Chadwick, who will be sharing a little bit of a glimpse into how she created her amazing wildlife pond in her garden, how she got started, set it all up, and some really beautiful photos to share with us as well. So really looking forward to hearing from you, Stephanie, if you're happy to share your screen. Also for you, yeah, amazing, thank you. Nice one. Stephanie, you're just muted, but you can just unmute.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hi. So my name's Stephanie. I have absolutely no professional training in biology or ecology or anything. I'm just a very keen amateur, really, and I'm really delighted that AWT has asked me to come here tonight and chat to you about my pond, my passion for my pond. So a little bit of background. I grew up with a pond in my garden, and my brother and I used to spend a lot of happy hours peering into its depths at all the tiny creatures and just watching what they were doing. And I thought to myself that when I grew up, I would have a garden with a pond, but it took a while to get there. I lived in London for a long time and then moved to Bristol with 3 sons and a dog. And they're not terribly conducive to gardening, and my back garden was pretty much a mud bath for about 15 years. And so it was in 2014 that I thought it would be a good idea to start having a pond. And so I thought, why are ponds so important? Well, really important for biodiversity. A pond supports an immense number of tiny creatures and larger creatures too, and they can make a big environmental impact with climate change and pollution, as well as being fantastic for wildlife. A really fabulous source of water, particularly in dry periods, really noticeable last summer. But the best thing is that it just gives you an opportunity just to watch nature, in your garden and learn about the things that are going on there. So it was in 2014 that I decided I'd have a go. And you can see the highly sophisticated device that I used to map out the garden. I didn't have any sort of particular size in mind, but the garden seemed to be able to support a pond that was about 144 centimetres long and 90 wide at its widest point. So we just put a hose on the ground to start with, and then we began digging. So I got some of my friends to help me dig the pond, and I don't think I thought it through as well as I might, because of course Bristol's really heavy clay, and we picked a torrential weekend to try digging it. So you can see my two friends in this bottom left-hand picture. It was about 50 centimetres, which didn't seem like a lot, but it took us 2 days to dig it, which was a lot, with a lot of help. That's not to say everybody has to have a pond this size, but it was quite effortful at the time. And I'd looked up about the sort of things that you needed and realised that ideally you have different levels in the pond, and I think you can see the shelves, the different shelf levels in that bottom picture. And then we lined it with fleece and then pond lining on top of that. And this is me with the red jacket tucking it in. I don't know if you can see how wet my bottom is, but it was absolutely torrential, and the mud behind it. But I hadn't really appreciated it was a pond that I wanted to attract wildlife to. And so honestly, it was the following morning that I opened the curtains to go to work at about 6 o'clock, and there was this fox just drinking from the pond, which was truly astonishing. So it certainly worked to that degree. Sophie, can you change the next one? Okay, so pond wildlife, having allowed the pond to sort of fill up, which took sort of a day and a half, and then put some stones around the edge and trimmed all the edges. It took less than 2 weeks for newts to find the pond. They were the first creatures that I noticed. Very difficult to photograph in my pond because they love to hide away. But there's one here in the top right. And there were two there very swiftly before there was any vegetation at all. And they seemed quite happy. What I realized, these are common newts, smooth or common newts is what they're known as. And they come to the pond to breed, and then they disappear and hang around your garden in dampish places for the rest of the year. And I had to be very careful when I was trimming the grass around the pond, because I'd quite often find newts and frogs in there. And I was very excited a couple of years later when I saw them with beautiful, colourful crests and spots, and thought, oh my goodness me, maybe I've got great crested newts in my pond. But actually it's the breeding colours of the smooth newts, really, really beautiful creatures. Frogs came pretty quickly too, and in March there's the most amazing scenes. It's like the pond is boiling with frogs, and in this bottom right hand picture you can see some frogs spawn in front of some contented frogs, but it just boils. It's extraordinary. And then the other bigger photo shows the little developing frogs, which I think is the most fascinating phase. It's really beautiful, the frog spawn, sort of beautifully lit with all those tiny creatures in it. Frogs, of course, return to the pond to breed again. I think after about a couple of years they come back to breed. My neighbours have got ponds that are in a slightly sunnier part of their gardens, and their ponds always boil about a fortnight before mine do. And I get a bit nervous that I'm not going to get my frogs back, but they've come back every year. course, they're a really good defense against all those slugs attacking my tender new plants. So they do very well. The frog spawn and sometimes occasionally we get toad spawn, but I've only seen that once. We have to be a bit careful because the birds like to eat it, particularly the heron comes and stands by the pond eating the frog spawn. But generally they do very well, and very often there are frogs and toads, particularly after it's been raining, hopping about the garden. So the sort of hidden bit, the pond insects, I'm not very good on pond insects, but we've got a few of them here. The unsung hero, the pond snail, and this lovely pond snail is just under the surface of the water with its, I'm not sure if it's technically called a mouth open, hoovering up little algae in the pond. You can see this is the pondweed on the top of the pond, and that's a tip of an oxygenating bit of plant that it's snuggled up next to. But they're a sign of a healthy pond, and they again just all came by themselves and just tootle about the pond. This creature in the middle, I hope you can see it. It's a little bit difficult, and I noticed it quite recently. I weeded the pond last autumn because it was getting a bit overgrown, and you can see the pond lining in these second two pictures, which also allowed me to be able to see some of the tiny creatures. And this extraordinary thing in the middle is the larvae of a caddisfly, a very unassuming fly, but the larvae build themselves this armor, and this one is carrying the armor. It's built with tiny little bits of twig and also this pondweed that you can see in the first photo. And I noticed it as this bright green little thing bibbling about. So it's not the world's greatest photo, but it's certainly a very interesting thing. There are, we have water boatmen and pond skaters on the top, but these are some of the things underneath. And a lot of other larvae. This one on the right, I think, is the larva of the southern hawker dragonfly. We also have the larvae of damselflies, but then they tend to have 3 lamella at their back end, and they're sort of slimmer than this. So I think that's what it is, but I'd be delighted if anybody wants to correct me on that. And the most extraordinary thing about these larvae is that if you have tall plants in your pond, when they're ready to hatch, after being in water for a couple of years, they climb up the tall plants. And what happens, what I saw a couple of years ago, was the most remarkable thing I think I've ever seen in wildlife, certainly domestically, was this southern hawker dragonfly hatching. And what happens is that the larva climbs up and clings to the tall plant. And then out of the back, the dragonfly pushes itself out and hangs down. And its wings are folded up against its back. You can see its beady eye looking at us in that first one. And then after about an hour, it gets enough strength in its limbs to curl up again and grab the outer casing of the larval shell with its front legs. And then it hangs its tail down, shakes its tail out, hangs its tail down, and gradually over, it was about 5 hours, the wings gradually plumbed up and fleshed out. And then it hangs there as the wings dry out. During that time, is very, very vulnerable to birds in particular coming to it. And you can see in the middle picture that there's another larva behind it that has hatched out. And then this is this beautiful, beautiful dragonfly just hanging there. And I think that is one of the most remarkable feats of nature, as good as anything David Attenborough can produce. It was absolutely astonishing. And then in the third picture, these are common blue damselflies, and they're mating. And we also have red damselflies as well, and 2 other sorts of butterflies I've seen, broad-bodied chasers and common red darter butterflies. Dragonflies. But we have little red damselflies and the blue ones as well. And they're an absolute treat to see, really fascinating. Next slide, Sophie, please. So the plants in your garden are very important. I ordered native plants right at the beginning from a specialist nursery, which came as little tiny plug plants, but they very quickly grew. And the top one shows the native British iris with a common carder bee getting pollen from it. The one on the bottom left is a fabulous plant called purple loosestrife, which is a very tall plant with a European honeybee having fun with it. And then these are two little hoverflies on another plant called it's called pickleweed, this one, and it has little purple flowers. Again, it's a tall one, but also I grow things like water forget-me-not. I've got native white lilies, water lilies, marsh marigolds, and spiked greater spearwort. Water milfoil is the plant that I use for oxygenation, which is the one that you saw the tip of previously. And then in front of the pond, you can see the heron ornament. That's where the pond is. I've grown quite a lot of my lawn long in the last, well, really since just before lockdown, but particularly in lockdown when I didn't have a lawnmower. And so what you can see in this one, the yellow is yellow rattle, which is a very good plant for parasitizing grass and actually gradually getting rid of it. And there's some ragged robin, that's the pink one. There are some taller, some little daisies at the front, and oxeye daisies as well. So if you have lots of plants, you will get a lot of insects and pollinators as well. It's very useful. We also get quite a few birds that come to the pond. And you can see this slightly blurry one. It's quite a long way, and I took it from inside the kitchen. Is a goldfinch coming to have a splash about, and the birds come and bathe and drink. This was taken recently. You can see that's the pond in its winter plumage, not looking so very attractive. But it's a hugely valuable source, and I'm lucky to live near Blaze, the Blaze estate, and get quite a lot of woodland birds to come and have fun in the pond. So hugely important for that. Oh yeah, and there's a green woodpecker that we quite often see in the garden that comes. We do get the great spotted woodpecker as well, and other woodland birds as well. I was given some very tall bulrushes, very generously by a friend, but actually they're much too big for the pond, and sometimes you have to be a little bit careful of those and yellow flag irises. I think that can sometimes take over. And I think since 2014, I've probably weeded the pond 3 times, which is an interesting process without falling in. My husband's got some waders, but we haven't used them yet. And the important thing when you weed the pond is to leave what you've weeded at the edge. And last year I did it in the autumn, and I watched all the little dragonfly larvae sort of scurrying as soon as I lifted it out, just sort of scurrying back into the pond, which again was good fun. So why have a garden? Why have a garden at all? Well, I would say that although my garden has a reasonably big garden pond for a suburban garden, you can make a pond in anything. You can make it in a bucket, you can make it in a washing up bowl, an old pot, anything that will hold water. Because if you do that, undoubtedly things will come. That's the really remarkable thing about the pond, I think, is that after work in particular, coming home and wandering down their garden with a cup of tea or indeed a glass of wine, just sitting there and watching all the insects buzzing and the things swimming around in it, all the life in it is really, it's really fabulous. And I think that, although I think I have been benefiting the local wildlife, there's no doubt that the local wildlife has been benefiting me, really, which is the point of it. I've also done a bit of rewilding of my front garden, which was just a tatty bit of lawn which never saw the sun, mostly by replacing a very old and threadbare privet hedge with some native hedge plants, which are just coming to the fore now. It's its third year now. And also as many pollinating plants as I could stuff in there at the front. So we've got lavender and penstemons, poppies, cosmos, and really open-headed plants, and some catmint here with I think it's a white-tailed bumblebee, but I think our previous speaker would be probably able to correct me. The very best plant for pollinators, I would say, is borage, which just seeds itself absolutely everywhere all over your garden. You don't need to do anything except buy a few seeds at the beginning. It's an absolutely superb pollinator and very pretty as well, so I recommend it. So really that's all I have to say is have a go, really. If you haven't got a pond, it will reward you tenfold, but try not to do it on a very wet weekend. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's lovely, Stephanie. Thank you so much for sharing those incredible photos of your garden. You kept saying like, oh, that's not the best photo, but I was just sat there thinking they were all incredible. So yeah, really, really stunning photos. Really great to hear about the work you've done. So thank you so much for sharing.
My neighbours are used to seeing me lying flat on my tummy.
Yeah, and the patience as well, like you mentioned, the dragonflies slowly unfurling over 5 hours. So yeah, really commend you for your just willingness to learn and practice. It's really amazing to hear. We do have some questions for you in the chat, but I thought it might be good to get Sophie first to share a little bit of information about our wildlife gardening competition. So if you want to do that first, Sophie.
Yeah, sure. No, that would be great. Yeah, thanks to both speakers. Really, really inspiring. And it is what it's all about, is just sharing the knowledge, sharing the joys. And it's not just for wildlife, it's for people as well. There's so many benefits for that. And through the wildlife gardening competition, I'll share the link in a moment, and we'll have it in the follow-up as well. Basically, it's to do that. It's to celebrate what wildlife gardening is and what it looks like. And it is a normal garden. There's a few little tweaks you can do here and there, and we're just going to be sharing and celebrating those tweaks there through the wildlife gardening competition. There are 4 categories to enter. Each has prizes as well. The 4 categories are individuals, so gardens at home. There's community groups, and that includes community spaces as well. So if you're involved in a group, it would be great to see what you do for wildlife through that. There's another category for schools and education facilities. So it could be nurseries, could be universities, any schools. And the final one is food growing. So this is just to celebrate all the wildlife friendly practices you can have whilst growing food. It doesn't include commercial this time around, but it could be a veg patch at home, it could be an allotment, it could be a community allotment. Yeah, we just want to share the amazing efforts that people do for wildlife gardening. So I'll share the link, and please enter. There's yeah, everybody that enters gets a certificate of recognition, because we want to spread the good word. And like I said, the prizes are amazing as well. So it would be lovely for you all to enter. And also, I just wanted to say quickly as well that this is all done through Team Wilder, and Team Wilder is all about celebrating, empowering, taking action for nature. And there's so much knowledge out there. We want to share what everybody has to say about that as well. So you'll be able to find lots of case studies, including Stephanie's case study, and there's a lot more photos on there. Her level of photography is huge. It's really inspiring. So we'll be sharing her Bluffin' Puffin Instagram links, but also the case study, which also has links about how to create a pond, but also the snippets of advice that she gave out. I saw a few people writing things down about, well, that's a good thing to grow. And yeah, we'd love to share all of that. So that's all on the case study as well. And if there's any other questions, fire away. But yeah, through Team Wilder as well, we really want to support community groups. So we're holding events like this to share knowledge. We've also got a community ecologist as well. So we've got a Team Wilder community ecologist, which you can book time in with. That could either be on video call or a site visit. This could be for community groups or individuals, actually. And it's just to get that specific advice about how you can manage the land for wildlife. So lots of tips, and we'll be sharing lots of knowledge that's gained from that through case studies and resources through the Team Wilder pages as well. And yeah, I mean, Team Wilder is all about celebrating the small actions for nature and the large, because they all make a difference together. So yeah, I'll share some of the links about Team Wilder as well, but we really want everyone to be part of Team Wilder so we can build a movement where it is the norm. There'll also be, yeah, there's also some other exciting things coming up. We've got wildlife champions, and I think Emma's in here as well, so we can do a little shout out about wildlife champions in a bit as well. Okay, great. Back to you, Ty.
Nice one, thanks, Sophie. Actually, Emma, do you, if you want to, you can do a quick update about the Wildlife Champions programme if you've got a couple of minutes. It'd be great to kind of do a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, we're still defining the project. It's all very new. But what Wildlife Champions are is we're looking to recruit 12 wildlife champions from 12 postcodes across Bristol, or across Avon, sorry. So that includes some in Yates, some in Bath, some in Bristol. And kind of like with the Team Wilder movement, it's really about celebrating people who have that passion for nature and just love for their community as well. So particularly like how Jasmine was mentioning, we're not expecting anyone to be an expert. You don't need to be a nature expert to get involved. Just someone with that real passion for nature and who knows their local area well and who wants to make a difference. And so, yeah, there'll be more flyers, websites, information soon. It's still kind of developing. But if you keep your eyes peeled for that, we'll be sharing resources about that. And if you know of anyone, or if you're in a community group and that sounds like something that's appealing, also feel free to get in touch. Because what Avon Wildlife Trust will be offering to the champions is you're going to be part of a peer support network, so get to link with other people, share ideas, share experiences. Everyone can learn from each other, very supportive and inclusive. And it will also be really tailored to what champions want individually. So if, say, the community group wants help with ecological advice, so like Sophie mentioned, we could refer you to the ecologist. We're going to put on workshops, training. So yeah, should be a really exciting project, but it's still in the very early stages. So keep your ears peeled for more information.
Nice one, thank you, Emma. That's great. Yeah, as Sophie mentioned, everyone will get a follow-up email after this evening, and we'll be sure to share all the links and information that we've spoken about already this evening. So just for the last 15 minutes, I'll just read out the questions we've got for Stephanie, but in these last 15 minutes, this is kind of opening up the floor to all of you. So if there's anything that you're working on that you'd like to share, if you've got any projects happening that you'd like advice on, if you're looking for volunteers, if you want general advice about your garden, then please pop a little question in the chat, or just say that I would like to jump in and speak about XYZ, and the floor will be yours. So it's open to everyone. It could be anything that you think you'd like advice on. And I'll make sure that I read out your question, or I'll open up the floor for you. In the meantime, Stephanie, we've got lots of questions about your wildlife garden. The first one from Emily is, so you mentioned earlier you should ideally have different levels in your pond. Is there a particular reason for this?
Yeah, it's just that the plants plants have different root lengths. So the water lilies, for instance, they can be put in the bottom of the pond quite deeply. That's how their roots go down deep. But there are other ones that just like to sort of live on the edge, so they need a shallower shelf to grow from. But also, if you've got a shallow shelf and things fall in, like hedgehogs, actually, I sadly have never seen a hedgehog in my garden. But you know, hedgehogs can fall in, then they can climb out again. I should have said one end of my pond is sort of like a shelf going down into the water, so that things can get round there. And at other bits, with the more superficial shelves, to the second level shelf before you get to the very bottom, I've put some stones and some some bits of wood so that anything can climb up. So that's the reason for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. You've also partly answered the next question, which was about things like hedgehogs being able to get in and out of the pond.
Yeah, that's a really, I should have said that earlier. That's a really important thing, so that it's not just a deep edge where things fall in and drown. It's so that, and gradually as your plants grow, they make a sort of matting around the edge that the birds tend to stand on to drink and to hop in and hop out. So yeah, it takes a year or so for that to happen. I can see that question, yes. And also, sunny or shady, better to be more sunny than shady, but important to have quite a bit. And actually, there was something I should have said, is that we, pondweed and blanket weed in particular can be a real problem. And so I use barley straw, which you can get in garden shops and pet shops as well, to put it in, and it comes in a sort of plastic net, which I really don't like because I found a newt caught up in it once. So I take it out of that and I stuff it in the leg of an old pair of tights. And when I did it the first time, it looked like there was a leg in the pond. It was really horrible. It was, in a sort of pale pair of tights, and it looked a bit sinister. So now I put it in black tights and weigh it down a bit. It was a bit shocking at first, and that's really, really good. And I change it twice a year. The barley straw. That's it's not expensive to get hold of at all, particularly from the pet shop. It seems to be cheap.
Nice. That would definitely give me a fright in the night if I saw a leg coming out of the pond.
Floating.
Great advice though. Nice. Okay. And then Sophie's asking how you grew the long grassy area in your garden, particularly if you managed in a shady area, as she's struggling to grow that.
Do you mean the one I showed the photo of, the bit in front of the pond? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the bit that was in the near of the photo that had all the and it had lots of colours.
Yeah, that's quite shady actually. It's just my grass. So that started off as me just not having a lawnmower and the grass growing. I've never used chemicals to have a stripy lawn at all. So it had dandelions in it and clover as well, red clover. All these things that I didn't know I had in it. So I just let the grass grow. No mow May is coming up. Do you struggle to let it grow at all, to get it growing at all in that shady bit?
Yeah, and the shady bit is not very good at all. And we've done no mow May for the last 2 years, and all that we find is the grass grows long and it does get the kind of lovely grass seeds on the top that look quite nice, but mostly it just folds over on itself, goes, and then anything that's underneath the folded bit goes yellow and dies, and I just end up with a really unhealthy lawn for the rest of the summer. And I already have a pretty unhealthy lawn, so it doesn't make it an overly appealing.
No, I would say that a good sort of quarter of my lawn is very shady and was always full of moss. But what I have done is to get little plug plants, or I think the yellow rattle will grow because it grows furiously in my shady bits, and that will get rid of the grass. But I know that the Grow Wilder team, if you go to Grow Wilder, they will help you with shade loving plants that you can get little plug plants of, and then they'll gradually colonize it. So that I think is what might be best to do.
Also, just to add to that as well, I have just written an article with Grow Wilder about shady plants with wildflowers that thrive there. They've got lots of different sections at Grow Wilder. It's like a wildflower nursery, and there's loads of advice there. But there is, I can share that in the follow-up as well. But there's like shady. It's a very common question. People ask, what wildflowers can we grow? It's called partial shade rather than full shade. But yeah, we'll be able to share that in the follow-up as well.
Nice. So the next question is from Carol, and Carol's asking, so we put a pond in about 4 weeks ago, and to date we've not had any wildlife inhabit it yet. Are we best to just leave it alone and let frogs or newts come themselves, or should I get frog spawn or similar from someone with an established pond?
Well, my understanding about getting frog spawn from somebody else's pond is that you might bring diseases with it. I have to say that in the first year when my neighbours' ponds had frog spawn in it and mine didn't, I did pinch frog spawn from their ponds, which didn't seem to stop the frogs later coming and making my own frog spawn, and it hasn't seemed to have affected them. But are there people, are you somewhere where there are ponds around you? You know, is it likely? Because I think mine must have come from, you know, there may be sort of 2 or 3 ponds within, I don't know, about half a kilometre away, and you know, and they can, the little creatures can go quite a distance. Or are you somewhere where there's not much of anything around you?
There's we're a new build, so there's quite new gardens around us, although there is some water, but some communal water, but I don't really know if anyone has got anything near us or not.
Okay, and have you got plants in your pond yet?
Not yet. That's the next stage that we need to do. Yeah, so I know I need to get those.
I would be, and how would they get in your garden? Have you got, is it open, or has it got sort of fences all around it?
There are fences around it, although there are some holes that have been drilled to let water in and out that the animals could travel through.
Okay, I mean, I would be optimistic that once you got some life in there with plants and insects, that would attract the frogs and the newts, because that's what they might like to eat. You want some slugs, I would say, in your garden.
Lovely, thank you.
But I'd be optimistic that if you put plants in it, then they'll come by themselves. I mean, if anyone else would like to correct me, I'd be delighted, because I have absolutely no formal training in this at all.
No, I think you're pretty on point there with everything you said. I'm the one of the community ecologists with Avon Wildlife Trust, and yeah, definitely back that up with just giving nature the space and time to do its thing, and it will come. And yeah, giving them, like you say, provide them with the right habitat, provide them with the right plants, and you'll sort of get that chain. You provide the plants, and you get the small, tiny, microscopic pond creatures, and then the things that eat them move in, and then it all sort of builds up. So yeah.
I think Grow Wilder got pond plants.
Yeah, they have marginal pond plants, but so like marsh marigold and like the purple leaf-striped ragged robin, but they don't actually sell the submersible, like oxygenating ones. So but yeah, the marginal ones you can get from Grow Wild.
I think I got mine from Armsbury Garden Centre, my oxygenating plants. It's a long time ago now, but their pond section has got I mean, those were sort of British native ones that I got there.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks, Eric. Sorry, I didn't realise you'd joined us because you had a whole test.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit late off the train and didn't have time to set it all up.
No worries. No, it's good to have you join us. I'm aware we've got 4 minutes left, and I'm really sorry if I don't get to your question, but if we don't answer your question, please just send it to us and we will make sure that we pass on everything. I'm just going to read out a couple more. So there's a really lovely question from Amy. She says she's going to be honest and scarily vulnerable, but I have multiple sclerosis, so I'm disabled with very limited energy and also mobility at times. I'm really struggling to create my dream wildlife garden alone, but I have so many ideas for a beautiful big garden and really want to create a wildlife haven, but money and energy and knowledge is limited. So I'd be interested if there's anyone here with some spare time who can help me with the labour of getting started, digging, or advice. Maybe a holistic skill swap, or she can cook nice food in exchange. I just thought that was lovely, Amy. And if anyone wants to jump in and offer Amy advice, but also I think this is the whole spirit of why we really wanted to set up these kind of chats and online events is if there is anyone, Amy, that you can connect with here in the chat, please do swap contact details and yeah, reach out to one another, because we would love to kind of facilitate that kind of sharing. And that ties nicely into our next community campfire, which will be in June, on the 12th of June, which will be along the theme of kind of community power and power sharing and community abundance of skills. So yeah, please do connect with Amy in the chat if you can help her out, and I'm sure she'll cook you a lovely dinner in exchange.
Well, can I just say, I do have some other skills. I can also offer things like holistic therapies and stuff, so you won't go home empty-handed.
No, that's lovely. I think that's really the spirit of these events, is we would love to connect people who have this passion and can help each other and offer advice. So yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat and for being vulnerable. Really appreciate it. That's lovely. We've got 2 minutes, so I'll read out one more question. I'm really sorry we're not going to be able to get to everyone. Georgina says she doesn't have a garden as she lives in a flat, but she does have some window boxes. She's been growing herbs in them for several years, but wanted to plant some flowers. She's planted some bulbs, miniature iris, miniature tulips, and daffodils, but the local squirrels have dug up most of the bulbs and eaten them with eyewitness evidence. Any suggestions of other flowers that she could plant that won't overgrow a window box? Maybe Eric might be able to help with that one, or anyone else actually.
Yeah, it depends what you're going for. I love fennel. I love the yellow flowers and the seedy taste. Yeah, any wildflowers really. It's just important to avoid cultivated varieties that have sort of complex flowers. Just stick to sort of native ones, so they're good for pollinators. And yeah, if it's more in shade, you can look at things like foxgloves or ivy, and then if it's more in sun, yeah, native wildflowers would be great. Yeah.
Nice. Anyone else got any ideas or wants to chip in? Please do. Either you can unmute yourself or add anything into the chat if you like. Seen some good recommendations for Iron Acton Garden Centre, which I would very much agree with. I live 8 minutes away and I spend far too much money there. It's great.
I'm also happy to put some wildflower suggestions for window boxes and pots as well. I spoke to Sean from Grow Wilder recently about that, so I'll be able to share those ideas as well.
Amazing.
If we've got time as well, I can see that Helen Woods. Helen, you're on the call as well. Did you want to do a quick shout out for your free training?
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you. So I'm the Nature and Health Coordinator for the West England Nature Partnership. So that's a partnership of various organisations hosted by Avon Wildlife Trust. And the whole vision is to kind of embed nature more into how we think about human health, from public health to kind of how we provide health interventions that incorporate nature. So yeah, I just want to tell you about some training that's coming up. We've got one that's we're doing. It's running in collaboration with the Natural Academy, which you may or may not have heard of. I'll put the dates in the chat, but we've got one. It's not until October and November. It's the Community Connect training. So that's about hosting, facilitating groups in nature, and it's all around kind of nature connectedness for human well-being and for the health of our natural world. And there's one coming up sooner, which is more about working with people with specific kind of identified health needs, and that's a bit of a longer training, so that's 6 days. The other one's 4 days. But yeah, I'll put the dates in the chat and my email address. So yeah, if you're interested in developing those types of skills and facilitating groups in nature, then yeah, please do get in touch. We've got some funded places and some kind of available places that are kind of self-funded as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Amazing. So yeah, again, apologies if I didn't get to reading out your question, but thank you so much to everyone for contributing, for asking questions, for answering questions, and just making this really wholesome discussion. It's always really lovely to get people together with a shared love of nature. And yeah, it wouldn't be the same without you all. So thank you so much for making this event so special. We will share every single link that has been discussed this evening. We'll also share a transcript of the chat, I think, with everyone that's attended. Please do correct me if I'm wrong, Sophie, but just to make sure that you can connect with anyone. If you'd like to share any contact information for yourself, an email address, please do pop that in the chat. And like I mentioned, the next community campfire will be on the 12th of June, which is actually part of the Festival of Nature, run by the Natural History Consortium, so that'll be really exciting. Again, it will be online on a Monday at 6 p.m, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Jasmine, who I know had to leave early, and to Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your amazing pond and your beautiful photography. It's been really inspiring to hear from you, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely evening and take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, that was amazing.